And on top of that, well, let's talk about the reading comprehension section. So there's not a whole lot to say, thankfully, about the reading comp section. So we're going to do some practice today. I'm going to send you guys a passage and have you work part of it, not the whole thing, but just part of it. So let's get started. So as you can see, the reading comp section comes right after lunch on DAT and OAT. There's no difference there. And it's basically the same because you got 60 minutes to do 3 passages. You should think about it in terms of passages rather than questions, because there's a variable number of questions per passage. So really you want to be taking 20 minutes per passage. If you're on that pace, you're doing pretty solid, which means you're probably not going to be reading it all the way through, because you're going to see the example I'm going to send you guys in just a brief moment, that these passages are actually kind of long. There's a lot of text in them. Trying to read the whole thing is going to be very difficult. But thankfully, that's okay, because the types of questions that are asked in this test are very minimal. You don't really have to have a great understanding of the passage itself. In fact, sometimes the passage you're talking about some really wacky stuff and science-based, but you don't necessarily have to understand all that science. You just have to be able to find the information and answer questions with it. So that's the nice thing about the way this test is constructed. So there's really just 2 basic types of questions in this test. Sorry about that. So anyways, there's 2 types of basic questions in this test. One is the retrieval question, which is basically saying, sorry, let me fix this for a moment. I don't know how it heard me say that to translate that, but I had my mic off. That's weird. So anyways, the retrieval type of questions are basically asking you to go find something in the passage. Some good examples of this are, which of the following statements best describes blah? So somewhere in the passage, they described this laryngomalacia, whatever this is. So you just got to find it and pick the answer that fits it the best. I just put him out of the office. So the other kind of question it might say is just straight up. It's just asking, here's this term, go find this term, where I'll put it in quotes. So they put the term in quotes, you go find it in the passage, and that's really about it. And they tend to put these questions roughly in chronological order. So you'll see, it's not perfect, but you'll see that the first questions tend to be earlier in the passage and the last questions tend to be later in the passage. So the second kind of question that you're probably going to see is the inverted retrievals. These are a little bit more difficult, and I call them inverted retrievals because they're saying all of the following except, or which one does not. So what does that mean you're going to have to do with these? Are you going to find 1 piece of information, or are you going to have to find 4 pieces of information? Going to have to find 1 piece of information, or are you going to have to try to find 4 pieces of information? You got to find 4. So these are going to take longer. You have to look for all 4 things that are there, and then whatever's left over that you didn't find must be the correct answer for these kinds of questions. That's the inverted nature of them. So you're looking for the answer that does not appear. And you can't just say, I'm going to find the one that does not appear, because it won't be there. So the only way you can do that is looking for everything else. Now, every once in a while, there is a third question type that comes up every once in a while. And I honestly would suggest that you skip it. Don't worry about that question if it shows up. The rare third question type, which is main point, purpose, tone, strengthen, weaken. They'll put in some kind of question like that. The purpose the author wrote the passage is to blah, or what would most strengthen the author's argument, or what would most weaken, or what was the structure? Why did the author write it this way? All those kind of harder core reading comp questions, they really only will have one or two in any given passage if they have any at all. So it's not worth reading in great detail and understanding. Just from answering all of the other questions, you will probably be able to answer these questions. So don't think that you have to actually do a solid read on the passage just because of this one or two questions that comes in it. It's not worth the effort. So do all the other questions first, and then do this one last. Luckily enough, these questions also tend to come at the end of the set of questions for the passage. So it's already set up basically for you to do all the other questions first most of the time. But if you do see one of these types of questions, this is the one that I would skip skip up front and then wait until the end to do it. Going through the passage, there's a couple different ways to approach it. And honestly, you're probably not going to do either of these, but you're going to probably do some hybrid of this because you're going to find the way that works. One of them is just like do passage mapping. So go through the question stems and write down a keyword from each question stem. And so you can do that on your scratch paper. And then as you go through the passage, you can look for those keywords and then right next to each of those keywords, what paragraph you found that in. So what you'll end up having is a list of question keywords and a list of paragraphs in which they are. Then when you start answering the questions, you're just going to go back to that particular paragraph and answer the question. So that's one way to do it, and that's what we call passage mapping. Another way is just go and not read the passage, do the simple retrieval questions first, and then like go to the beginning of the passage, scan through, see if you can find that question, and then answer it. And then go on to the next question, do the same thing, and so on and so forth. And do those inverse retrieval questions last because you're going to have seen more of the passage to be able to answer those things. So the one technique that I don't suggest you do is a full read of the passage. Now, that's if you're a slow reader. Anybody here like really like a good speed reader? They can understand what they read very, very fast. If that's you, then you may actually just go ahead and do the read. But you got to know that you got very little question. You're going to be answering like 13 to 15 questions in a passage in 20 minutes. If you've given yourself 1 minute per question, that means you've only got 5 minutes to get through that passage. And I find that most of the passages are far too long to actually get a good solid read in 5 minutes. So you want to work on a technique that usually involves the hunt and peck technique. Like find the information you need, don't read it, just read that region, read that paragraph for that question.